A Boston beatdown last night in game number 1 of the 2024 NBA Finals as the Celtics win by nearly 20 on the opening night of the NBA Championship Series at home inside TD Garden after a full week off from NBA playoff action. We expected this game to probably be closer in game number 1 of the NBA Finals than the result we saw. Boston blitzed them from the very start, 37-20. The Celtics lead after the opening quarter, and really it continued to be that way despite Dallas kind of mustering a comeback in the second half. 107-89. The C's easily cover as a 6.5-point home favorite. A total that skied all the way up to 217, and a hook does stay under. Just the second cover DRS for the Boston Celtics in their last 7 games. Now all 15 postseason contests, the Celtics have been booked as the favorite.
Yeah, we waited so long for game number 1, but also, as I preached, because the heavy public side was on the Mavericks getting the 6.5 points. And sometimes we know how that works out. Similar to the Super Bowl, because typically it's like, okay, you got 2 or 3 days to get ready for a betting. Let's just see where the public's going. But you have the public settling in for over a week and deciding that the Dallas Mavericks should be that play. But the sports books, like the FanDuel sports book, say, no, we're not lowering that number despite getting 75 to 80% of the tickets coming in on the Mavericks. We're going to keep it around that 6 range and actually increase it to 6.5. The total, which I actually thought I agreed with, going over, but the Boston Celtics were very good on offense. Dallas just didn't show up. Now, the tough part about this is that we are going to overanalyze based on game number 1, as if the Mavericks haven't lost any playoff games, they're going to get swept in 4 games. That's not going to happen. But some of the key indicators that we looked at, Ben, where you said to yourself, Boston was so good during the regular season, home and away. Boston was unbelievable at home. Kristaps Porzingis is coming back into the lineup, a de facto all-star that you're going to get back already on a solid club that was hammering Eastern Conference talent in the playoffs. I just didn't see it coming away because, to be honest, I missed tip-off for this game. Around 9:15, 9:20, I'm like, oh, let me turn on the game. I was like, wait a second. Boston's already running away with it. You go ahead, check out some Major League Baseball scores, get back to the game in the second quarter. It's even worse. It's like, wow, this game is over. And all of a sudden that narrative starts to shift. Like, is this as big as mismatch as we thought it was going to be? Because technically, I didn't understand what we were going to get in game number 1. But the Boston Celtics being good at home, check. The Boston Celtics playing very good defense, check. Porzingis coming back off of the bench and looked like he never left the lineup. Boy, oh boy, it's going to be tough to beat the Celtics based on that one-game narrative. I loved what I saw out of the Celtics, hated what I saw out of the Mavericks.
So let's talk about trends, because part of the handicap DRS in the final month of the regular season, when it was very clear the Celtics would have a favorable path in the Eastern Conference, and it was pretty darn clear that Boston would end the year with the best regular season record, giving them home floor advantage throughout the entirety of the postseason, Eastern Conference and beyond, into a potential NBA championship series. We talked about how dominant the Celtics were inside TD Garden all year long. Last night, game number 1 of the 2024 NBA Finals was game number 50 for the C's in Beantown this season. They are 44-6 straight up in Boston. Now 27-21-2 against the spread. 8-7 ATS as the favored side in all 15 games here throughout their playoff run. But last night was just the second time, and now their 9 home playoff games, they were booked as a single-digit favorite inside TD Garden, and they entered only covering once in their last 6. And you talked about the public betting on the Dallas Mavericks, and frankly, DRS, it makes sense from an underdog perspective. The Mavs entered the NBA Finals 6-1 straight up as an underdog throughout this playoff run that sees them in the NBA Finals, but it really did not matter last night. Both teams over in 5 of their previous 6 games. Entering this series, we stayed well under a total on the rise of 217 and a hook yesterday. And Donnie, there was so much conversation about how easy it was for the C's, a Boston breeze throughout the Eastern Conference playoffs. Every series, the star on the other side, injured, unable to complete that set. One thing maybe we did not really discuss enough was what Kristaps Porzingis would do in his return. 14.5, the points prop yesterday for KP, a number he was over by the halftime break. He finishes with 20 points in 21 minutes off the bench and does cash my best bet of the day as well, over 1.5 blocks, finishing with 3.
Yeah, he had a sensational chase down block, too, which lets you know that he's really healthy. And he also saw a couple dunks out of Porzingis, which also means that he's not being hesitant on that calf. So we're talking about Porzingis coming off the bench, playing 21 minutes in his first game back and scoring 20 points and being a plus 13. Good luck, Dallas Mavericks. This is one of those where we didn't know what to anticipate. And sometimes you look and say, okay, they've been rolling. Talking about the Boston Celtics. They don't really need Porzingis, but coming off of the bench is kind of interesting because usually he is a star player in the NBA. The minute you come back into the lineup and you don't have a minutes restriction, which we were told before the game, you expected him to start. So once they were like, all right, no minutes restriction, but he's not going to start, like, hey, is he really all the way back healthy? Or they're just trying to get a look-see. But he was on fire right out of the gate, which is crazy because also you look at this easy victory for the Celtics, Ben. Jason Tatum, 16 points. Brown, 22 points. Rewind this and tell me before the game started that that's what your starters were going to provide. And also say on the opposite side, you're going to get a 30-point performance out of Luka Doncic. I might think the Dallas Mavericks win this game, but certainly, Ben, covered the 6.5. That's how poorly Dallas played. And it wasn't as if you take a look at the Boston Celtics where it's like, hey, they shot 58% as a team from the field. They didn't. They were under 50%. Hey, they crushed it from three. They shot over 50%. No, they didn't. 38%. Okay, they went to the free throw line a ton. Well, they only went 19 times and made 68% here. It wasn't as even if Boston played a perfect game and still with an easy victory. That's the tough pill to swallow as we're looking towards game number 2 with the Mavericks. What are we going to get out of them? Because they're in the bullseye right now.
But it was the high volume from three from the Celtics, 42 attempted, everybody in the starting lineup, and then you could include Kristaps Porzingis as their sixth man, made multiple three-pointers last night. Derek White hit 3, he had 15 points. Jason Tatum hit 3, but he only finished with 16. A game in which Boston won by nearly 20 points. Jason Tatum had 16 and 11, well under his points prop of 27 and a hook. Jaylen Brown was Boston's leading scorer, second most in the game, 22 points. He was under his points prop of 23 and a half, which is where the number stood entering game number 1. But relatively efficient, at least, for Jaylen Brown. We'll look at where things stand for the Dallas Mavericks because despite a 30-point performance from Luka Doncic, they did not even get close to covering a 6.5-point number and what it means for the rest of the NBA Finals. Next. If you have a sports storyline, if you have a narrative that you want to throw out there on the table, make sure you run it by Donnie Rightside first because DRS put a little bit of tampering down on the idea that Kyrie Irving's return to Boston would be the biggest deal in the 2024 NBA Finals. Even Kyrie, after a struggle of a night on the opening game of the 2024 NBA Finals, only 12 points for Irving in his return to Beantown, 0 of 5 from deep, just 6 of 19 from the floor, said after the game, DRS, it wasn't nearly as hostile as I expected it to be. And you thought if there was ever a time for Boston to be ruthless at Kyrie Irving, it would be a night in the NBA Finals where he scored only 12 points and didn't hit a single three.
Yeah, exactly. You can have any rivalry you want, but if the game is basically over in the first quarter, the fans understand that it just turns into a party atmosphere. Yeah, you're going to boo Kyrie Irving some, but also he did a great job of diffusing that situation, it feels like. And again, this wasn't as, Boston's angry at Kyrie Irving. They just played 2 nights ago. Now we got to really get angry. He had 7 days to say every day, boy, I love Boston. Really wish I would have did it differently. And if I could have brought a championship to him, he was saying all the right things, also coupled by an easy win by Boston. Let's flip the script there. 37-20, Dallas at the end of the first quarter. Kyrie, 5 of 5 from 3. Oh, it would have been on and popping at the TD Garden last night. But the fact that it was just a de facto party atmosphere 3 minutes into the game really added to how angry are you going to get at a rival or rival player when you're just dusting them the entire time.
And Luka Doncic, 30 points last night, the game's leading scorer, the only player to get to that 30-point benchmark. 4 threes, the volume there once again. He has attempted at least 11 threes in the last 6 games since the start of the Western Conference Finals against the Timberwolves. Always something to keep in mind. 3.5 was his 3 points prop, heavily juiced on the over, around minus 172. Dallas's second leading scorer last night was actually P.J. Washington, who had 14 points but didn't hit a single three, which has been his calling card throughout this NBA postseason. Let's call a spade a spade. The Mavericks are not going to win an NBA championship or maybe even a single NBA Finals game if P.J. Washington is the second leading scorer with 14 points. So that leads us, DRS, to what we will see here the rest of this NBA championship series. Boston entered as a minus 225 favorite to win this series outright and hoist championship banner number 18 in Beantown after a dominant Game 1 performance, covering as a 6.5-point favorite, 107-89. The Celtics now minus 420 to win the NBA championship.
Yeah, I love to be a little bit of a contrarian, which is why I like the Boston Celtics at minus 6.5 last night, just because the way the public was loading up. And I'm saying, boy, are we really giving a gift here to the Celtics because of how good they are and Porzingis is coming back. But it's hard to absolutely love it because technically I didn't know what was going to happen. Now you're taking a look at what happened in game number 1. I'll tell you right now, I'm probably going to buy some stock in Luka Doncic because even if they play bad, he's like, all right, I always can get my own shot. He shot 26 times and scored 30 points. If that game was within single digits in the fourth quarter, he scores 40 points in that game. And who knows how many rebounds and assists he would accumulate at that point. But things have to change here for Dallas. And also, when I talk about that contrarian angle, a lot of times, like, hey, you know what? Everybody's going to be down on Dallas, and rightfully they should be. Ooh, that's a big price point now that you can take on the Dallas Mavericks. Based on what I saw last night and healthy Boston Celtics team, who, again, I preface this by saying, they didn't play all that great last night, the Boston Celtics, and easily won that game. That gives me a lot of pause, even at some of those bigger price points on the Dallas Mavericks, even though we've only played one game.
And I think that because of the fashion in which Boston dismantled Dallas in game number 1, people are thinking Boston is going to blow out the Mavericks throughout the entirety of this NBA Finals. Ooh, maybe it wasn't so easy for the Celtics in the Eastern Conference playoffs. Maybe it's just that Boston has been that supreme team in the association all year long. And I think there is truth to that statement. But I don't think the Celtics are pulling off another gentleman's sweep. I don't think the Celtics are going to outright sweep the Mavs as well. So as we look at the odds for this series to end in 4 games is still unlikely at plus 440. But you see that plus 210 number. I'll take it even a step further. The Celtics at plus 240 to win this series in only 5. Dallas gets 1 at a certain point. Donnie, you see the updated series spread? It's the C's laying a game or 2.5 games now at plus 122. That's a bad bet. That would mean that Boston has to win this series in 5 games. If you think that is possible, the Celtics at plus 240 to win this series in 5 is better. That does take into account that Boston could also win in an outright sweep, but I don't think we believe that is going to happen. More around the NBA Finals coming your way as we come back from a commercial break live right here on the Early Line. So Boston blows out Dallas in the opening game of the 2024 NBA Finals. DRS entering this NBA championship series, the Celtics were a hefty favorite at minus 225 to win the NBA title. The Boston Celtics have been an odds-on favorite to win the NBA championship since midway through the opening round, now about a month and a half ago, of this NBA postseason. So we shouldn't be overly shocked. The Celtics were even dominant in the opening game of the NBA championship series against the Dallas Mavericks. But as things happen, the numbers move drastically based on one result, especially when that result and outcome is an 18-point victory for the C's at home that looked rather comfortable and easy last night. But entering game 1, the shortest correct score market, which is Boston to win the NBA championship and in how many games, had the Celtics to win in 5 and 7 at the same price at plus 340. I think there are some, Donnie, that wake up on this Friday morning and say, all right, maybe Boston just is that good. I could see a sweep, probably a gentleman's sweep. I don't think we're getting past 5 games. How did the game 1 result change your mind, if at all, for how the rest of the NBA Finals plays out?
Yeah, what have you seen from me lately? We're all human beings here. Even if you said you had this series going 6 or 7 games, it's only 1-0 at this point. The Celtics didn't get 3 victories last night in one game because of how dominant they were. It's still 1-0. And also, let's remind ourselves, do you remember those dominant performances in game number 1 Boston had at home? How did they perform in game number 2 in a few of those series? That'll give you pause. And also, we talked about we weren't really sure what we were going to get out of the Celtics here and how they would use Porzingis and maybe attack. Now you see their defensive structure set up. They'll be able to break down film. They have some days off to get that done. And you wouldn't be surprised if the Dallas Mavericks won in game number 2. Now, granted, that line 6.5, depending where you're shopping at. We now look at Sunday's game. That's up to a 7-point number, relatively the same total at 214.5. So I would caution to say, boy, what I saw in game number 1 is exactly what I'm going to see in game number 2. We know that doesn't happen in professional sports. Dallas is a very good basketball team. Those guys will eventually show up, and maybe they do it in game number 2. So I'm just talking to the people that got those tickets there where we need game 6s and game 7s. Don't give up hope just yet based on what you saw last night. If it was that easy, nobody would be allowed to bet because everybody would just steamroll the Celtics in 4 games and we'd all be millionaires.
I've said it so many times on the show. I bet Boston to win the NBA championship on March 20th at a plus 220 number. I have been holding on to that ticket, hoping for outcomes like this, hoping that Boston could breeze through the Eastern Conference to get to the NBA Finals and win championship number 18. And so when I say that now I'm going to bet the Dallas Mavericks money line for game number 2 on Sunday, I feel pretty confident in saying so. The Celtics have played 15 NBA playoff games in this postseason run. They have lost 2. Both have come in game number 2 at home inside TD Garden. Boston made it look so easy in game number 1. I guarantee you adjustments are made for the Mavs in this second game that it will be at least a ton closer. That Dallas is going to cover as a 7.5-point underdog, if not win outright. And I really do think there are a couple of best bets based on the series odds right now. You could have plus money in a big way on the Mavericks if you think Dallas does make this a series. You could look at the total games market. You could correctly predict winner of the NBA championship and in how many games. But, Donnie, what was one of the numbers that we talked about a ton? The over-under for the total games in this NBA Finals series. 5.5, and the over was heavily juiced. After Boston wins game 1, over under 5.5, the over is now minus 132. I still think we see at least 6, and I don't think you're paying all that much of a premium anymore.
No, and I believe, because I remember taking a look at it when we first opened up, it was like that minus 165 or so price to go over 5.5 games. Within like one day, that jumped up to like minus 180, minus 190, because everybody's going like, wait a second, this could be an absolute steal. And appropriately, FanDuel did change those numbers. But now you take a look at that beatdown last night as if it was 3 games in 1 that the Celtics won. And now you're thinking that it might go shorter, which again, this is what we saw last night. It was like, boy, this looks like a really big mismatch all the way through. But we've seen that before, and series have been able to change. Injuries happen, momentum happens, great players are able to take over games. And also, this wasn't a normal environment. This wasn't, we both played on Monday, now we're going to meet up on a Wednesday and play again. We talked about this ad nauseum for the past week. How are these two teams going to play? Because something could be amiss. And also, I pointed out, what happens if today we woke up where the Dallas Mavericks had won an easy victory over the Celtics? Series is over at this point. They can't go back. Like, no, the changes from game 1 to game 2 are going to be drastic. Now, if we do see a Boston Celtics blowout in game number 2, then you'll probably say, okay, this is probably ending in 5. You get a split back in Dallas, you come back to Boston. That's the way it's going to be. But also, let me get this off my chest as well. Yesterday, we played a game on a Thursday, right? I'm not saying you got to play every day or every other day because we know how the ratings work in the NBA. And also, the fact that this game is on Sunday, there's no other NBA games on during the day. But hear me out on this. Now I understand what the NBA is doing because the NBA ratings across the board, Ben, are down. Did you see the media numbers that they just chalked up from 3 different networks that are going to pay them? So I'm almost going to have to take a back seat when I say, make me commissioner for ratings, because it's apparent, Ben, ratings don't matter. The price of the brick goes up anyway. So quite frankly, if they wanted to put the Celtics and the Mavericks back at 9 o'clock or a 9:30 tip, I can't even fight it now because apparently ratings don't matter. It equate to dollar figures for the league. Do whatever they want. I thought I was on a crusade for the right direction. Go like, look, ratings are down. Let me make some of these changes so we can get unbelievable ratings. But ratings don't matter apparently anymore. So go ahead, NBA. Stack these at midnight on Sunday night. Who cares? If nobody watches, doesn't matter. Still get paid anyway.
You would expect the game 2 tip on a Sunday standalone kind of market to be a little bit earlier. It's 8 p.m. Eastern time, scheduled for inside TD Garden in game number 2. One final point before we flip it over to the Dan Hurley conversation. Jason Tatum was an odds-on favorite to win the NBA Finals MVP. Now it's plus 105. Jaylen Brown creeping his way back up the board. listen, neither were all that sensational in an easy Boston victory in Game 1. I think you're getting a plus money price now on Jason Tatum. If you really wanted to hand out an NBA Finals MVP after only one game, it would go to Kristaps Porzingis at this moment.
Yeah, no, look, Kristaps Porzingis has been really good in those 20 minutes. What happens now, Ben, if he plays 25, 30, 35 minutes in the starting lineup? Good luck on that. That was the most eye-opening thing was, and it wasn't as if he had to get his legs under him. He was the best player on the court the minute he got out there, Ben, which was, I didn't expect that at all. We were expecting what? 15 minutes, 7 points, maybe hit a 3, ease him back in, and he was awesome.
7-1. Now the price on KP to win the NBA Finals MVP. Fourth shortest number. Luka Doncic's price remains pretty much what the Mavericks number is to win the NBA championship. 2-1 before game number 1. Plus 188 was the Mavericks series outright price before last night's opening game. Plus 330 now for Dallas as an underdog. Plus 350 for Doncic to win the NBA Finals MVP. Brian Fonseca's NBA Finals focus following game number 1, night number 1 of the 2024 NBA Finals, and a Boston blowout inside TD Garden. Fonseca joins us here live on this Friday for the next 2 segments to look back at game number 1 and if at all it has changed his expectations for the remainder of this series. Brian Fonseca is here on this Friday. Fonseca, glad to have you here on this Friday on the early line.
Absolutely. Anytime. You guys know it.
We are very, very glad to dive into game number 1 with you. So, the Celtics win by 18, 107-89. Boston covering easily as a 6.5-point favorite at home inside TD Garden. Total was 217 and a hook, and it stays well under. So, nearly a 20-point victory, Fonseca, for the C's last night. What was the main reason Boston was so dominant in game number 1?
They played like it was game 1 of the NBA Finals, and Dallas, I don't know what Dallas was doing. Dallas looked like they were caught off guard by Boston's effort. Like, hey, why are you guys running so hard for these offensive rebounds and crashing glass this early in the first quarter? Like, what is this? Kristaps Porzingis comes into the game, and it's like, why are you blocking shots, bro? Like, relax. We're just here to play basketball. And then it took them a while, and they finally get into the game in the third quarter and have a good third quarter, but obviously wasn't enough. They did cut the lead at one point to, I think it was 8 points, probably the closest it was, or something around there. And then Boston put it on them one more time before ending it. I hated Dallas's game plan. I don't know why they were, even as they fell behind by a lot very early, so insistent on, hey, we're going to shoot a lot of 2s. We're going to drive through the lane. We're going to try to get things at the rim, and we're going to put up mid-range jumpers, and it didn't make a lot of sense. They had a 3-point rate of 32.1. This is a team that had a 44% 3-point rate during the regular season, 3-point attempt rate during the regular season, and this was second only to the Boston Celtics. These are the top 2 teams in 3-point attempt rate from the regular season. Boston has dropped from 44 to about 41 in the playoffs before last night. Now they're just above 40, which is still high, but last night they were at 32.1. You're not going to beat a team in the Celtics who's playing the math the way they are with 3-point shooting, where their 3-point rate was above 50% last night. You're not going to beat a team like that just shooting 2s. You're just not. So it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then willingly switching small guys on to Kristaps Porzingis, that was stupid. That being said, I think they have adjustments they can make for game 2. So
when we looked at that game 1 here coming into it, and the question marks were going to be from me, which team was going to show up? Now, granted, they're both really good, but having off over a week here, getting ready for the finals, sometimes you get a little bit of a rust. Boston, 37 points in the first quarter. Dallas only 20. It was apparent that Boston was ready to play and Dallas wasn't. And also, Brian, taking a look at the game, typically it's like you're going to lean on your superstars. Tatum, 16 points. Brown, only 22 points, and still easily won. So looking at that game between the 2 superstars for Boston, the expectations are they'll probably get better even with that easy victory. So after game number 1 ends, how do we feel about the Boston Celtics moving forward and what we can anticipate from Tatum and Brown?
They're 1-2 in game 2s in the playoffs, and Dallas hasn't lost a game 2 yet in the playoffs. Dallas is also 5-2 in game 2s with Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic averages about 34, 8-7 or 34, 9-8, whatever it is, one of those 2 in game 2s. So that's really it, right? That's the hurdle that Boston has. It's like you have to be able to keep your foot on somebody's throat somebody who's better than the Heat without Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier, the Pacers without Tyrese Halliburton, and the Cavs without Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen, and later Karis LeVert. No big deal. But I think that's really what it is they have these letdown spots. Third quarter was kind of a letdown spot for them last night. I do think that Dallas is going to make some adjustments, and the main thing for me is if they bomb away more from three, they can potentially level this out. Boston was great from three early on. It kind of calmed as the game went a little bit, and then they were able to have enough to finish there. So, there's a world where they just are red hot from three again. But I think there are some things, as I alluded to already, that Dallas can do in game two.
A 15-shot distinction from three-point range between the two. Dallas just 7 of 27 from three last night. Boston shot it 42 times, only made 16 when all was said and done. But you can tell the offensive efficiency that the Boston Celtics operate at. All 5 starters making multiple threes, and that includes their 6th man last night in Kristaps Porzingis, who had 20 points in his first basketball game in nearly a month and a half since game number 4 of the opening round series against the Miami Heat. That was back on April 29th. KP back in the rotation last night, Fonseca. What does it mean for the C's to have Porzingis back?
Yeah, he looked awesome. I'm somebody who was like, man, we have to see, because calf injuries are tricky. We've seen Kevin Durant return from a calf injury and then tear his Achilles after 11, 12 minutes of playing basketball. And that was around the same amount of time that Kristaps Porzingis missed. Kristaps Porzingis sat, I believe, 5 more days. So, yeah, we'll have to see him make it through the series healthy, but he looked excellent last night. And the thing about him was his plays were loud. His plays on offense were loud. There were threes from 27, 29, 30 feet. He was getting and ones. He was taking advantage over smaller guys like Derrick Jones Jr., for example, which, again, I don't know why Dallas willingly gave him those switches, but that was what it was. And then on the defensive end, there were loud block shots, rim protection in general. I think if you have a ticket for him, which was a hefty one, if you have a ticket for him to get Finals MVP, you're looking pretty good right now. The only thing is he going to continue to do this? Is he going to continue to do this with, they said there was going to be no minutes restriction. Of course there was, because look at the game. He also came off the bench. I think for now, just keep him there. Keep him in the 6-man role, because it actually strengthens your depth. Like, Boston is a very good team. They're not an especially deep one. They look deeper when Kristaps Porzingis is coming off the bench as their 6-man next to Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard, as opposed to it just being Al Horford or, somebody else on their lineup. So I like the idea of keeping him coming off the bench, at least for now. And if Dallas wins game 2, you could sort of readjust and see moving forward. But if they keep him on the bench and they win game 2, go up 2-0, then yeah, I have no reason to see that Kristaps Porzingis should be even returning to the starting lineup if you still want to manage his minutes.
I agree. I think it's a great take on that, because if it isn't broken, don't fix it. He was wonderful coming off the bench. It almost would get you a little bit alarmed if he came off the bench, played 20 minutes, and went 0 of 7 from three-point range, because he's used to being in the starting lineup. We'll see what happens in game 2, game 3, and we'll see, obviously, if we have an extended series. But if we do look at the superstars for the Dallas Mavericks here, Brian, Kyrie Irving, 6 of 19 from the floor, 12 points, a minus 19, not good enough. We knew we were going to get a high usage rate out of Luka Doncic, playing 38 minutes, 12 of 26 from the floor, 10 rebounds, but only 1 assist, accounting for 30 points here. What are the expectations moving forward from those two? And do we need giant performances just to be competitive here, apparently, against the Boston Celtics out of those guys?
I feel like you need one of those two to have a giant performance. Kyrie Irving absolutely has to be better. Luka Doncic as well. I thought his 30 points were kind of just like, they were just 30 points, but you didn't really feel them like that until, somewhat the third quarter. But for the most part, it wasn't an appreciably awesome Luka Doncic game, even though aesthetically people are going to look at, hey, he got 30 points, he got 10 rebounds. But no, it didn't look like that. It didn't feel like that. Kyrie Irving, though, he just looked frazzled from the beginning. It was weird. I think he's too nice. Like, I don't know if it's, the ayahuasca or whatever rumored, like, but now he's just like, he's turned over a new leaf. He's a great guy all of a sudden. And he's, God bless you, and praying for everybody and shaking everybody's hands and whatever. And he actually gave credit to a ref for calling him for like a travel or whatever it was last night. And I'm like, bro, like, it's the finals. You got to be a killer, man. Especially in this arena where they're booing you every time you get the ball. Derek White and Drew Holiday guarding you, like, that's obviously going to be tough. And this is why I didn't think he was going to have an amazing scoring series. But I do think he could still have amazing scoring moments. But man, I would like for him to be more not aggressive from like just a shots standpoint, because he had 19, but I don't know. I just want to see him like really come at people's throats a little bit more. I feel like he's being a little too nice.
He needs more hostility. He said the Boston crowd wasn't all that bad last night. What's happening to the Kyrie we know? More on the NBA Finals next. The Celtics victorious on the opening night of the 2024 NBA Finals, winning 107-89, covering as a 6.5-point favorite. As Brian Fonseca joins us for a second consecutive segment, Fonseca, I think it's pretty easy to say the Celtics were a 6.5-point home favorite. They have played 50 games in Beantown this year. They have won 44 of those 50 home games inside TD Garden. So Boston winning game one, even of the NBA Finals at home, is not overly shocking or surprising, but in the manner of which they did, winning by nearly 20, 107-89, maybe that has altered some viewpoint of how the rest of this NBA championship series plays out. Did the 18-point win for the C's change how you think the rest of the NBA Finals goes?
No, because I came in with the mindset that what Dallas needs to do if they want to prolong this series is they have to split in Boston and at least split in Dallas. One of the bets I like going into the series was 2-2 after 4, because I could see Dallas, as they have been, they've been winning game twos on the road. They've done it in every series so far in the playoffs. And Boston has obviously had a couple letdown spots against much inferior teams based on health. But Dallas has been able to do this already. And I felt like, all right, Dallas can get the split against Boston, who not a great home playoff team over the last several years, but very, very good on the road. And Dallas isn't like amazing at home in the playoffs. So it just felt logical to me that you can get a 2-2 split. I felt like this was a 6-game series at minimum, because, I mean, I feel like Luka Doncic would win more than one game in this playoff series. So this is shaping up to me. I mean, I didn't think Dallas would come out like that in game one, because, that I don't know what their game plan was again. Like, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me just from a schematic standpoint. But I'm not like more worried about, hey, this could be a sweep now after watching game one. We've all been watching basketball long enough to know the weirdest game in the series is often game one. Like, weird things just happen in game one, and then we'll see some adjustments, and then adjustments to the adjustments, and then counters to those counters and things of that nature. So to me, it's just business as usual almost.
Taking a look at some of these price points, Brian, in this series now, and you're right about this. Like, you don't get 3 wins for a blowout victory in game number 1. It still only counts as 1 win. You go into game number 2, and Dallas can even that up before going back to Dallas. But the Boston Celtics, a -2.5 spread number now at a +122 price. So expecting a much more quicker series here, apparently. And Boston, which came in yesterday around that -220 marker, now sits at a -420 marker the rest of the way. So if we're looking at some of those odds and statistics there, moving forward, does it entice you a little bit more to take Dallas, or is it just like that public opinion of, wow, I can't take Dallas now based on what I just saw in game number 1? We're probably going to get that same expectation throughout the rest of the series.
Yeah, for me personally, I don't feel the need to do anything because I have a Mavericks 23-1 future, and Boston just won game 1. So if I wanted to hedge, I'm probably like, why would I do that now? Like, just wait after they potentially lose game 2. The line might not even adjust that much. It would probably have to be after game 4 if it's 2-2 like I want. Like, that's probably, if I want to get back in on Boston, that's probably the spot I want. But then I'd look at it and be like, hey, now it's a best of 3. Do I want to take Boston to win 2 of these? I don't know. Because again, out of respect for Dallas and what they've accomplished. So to me, I think if I weren't in the 23-1 club, so to speak, with my Mavs future, then yeah, I'd probably look at this and be like, oh, that +2.5 is interesting, because I think now there could be an overreaction to the game 1 that we just saw. And also there is a world where Boston actually, they did win game 2 last series. It was against the Pacers and Andrew Nemharden basically, but they won game 2 last series. There's a world where it's like, all right, maybe Boston could actually like end this in 5. I don't think any of us think that they're going to suddenly sweep Dallas, because we probably have more respect for them and for Luka Doncic in particular. But a lot of people were looking at Celtics in 5, Celtics in 6. And I think those people are in pretty good position. If you're like me and you're like, hey, Dallas could win this series if they push this to a 7th game, because, I mean, Luka Doncic on the road in a Game 7 is terrifying, especially in Boston, where we've seen them drop a home Game 7 recently. Yeah, I think everyone should sort of stay pat because it was just Game 1.
Yeah, I still think the best bets right now, with where the series odds have shifted following Boston's dominance in Game 1, is looking at Dallas covering 2.5 games. That means if it gets to 6, the Mavericks have already cashed that ticket, or just the over-under of total games now standing at 5.5. It was 5.5, but the over had more juice. Now it's just minus 130. Fonseca, let's look at the NBA Finals MVP odds. You mentioned that if you had a large ticket on Kristaps Porzingis before the opening night, you're feeling good right now. KP, 4th shortest number at 7-1. It's pretty clear from the odds makers that if Dallas wins the NBA championship, Luka Doncic is going to win the NBA Finals MVP. The Mavericks priced to win the series outright plus 330. Luka's individual number plus 350. So we'll save that conversation about Doncic for another time. If the Boston Celtics end up winning championship number 18 in organization history, who would get your bet to win NBA Finals MVP?
I still think the odds on Tatum are too short. I feel like Jaylen Brown is kind of the best value here because I don't know what Kristaps Porzingis is he going to be in this 6-man role going forward? If so, I don't think we could reasonably expect him to do what he did last night in every single game. He kind of would need to, even though I think he's a walking matchup problem for the Mavs, and they're going to have to really figure something out. But at some point, you think he's going to miss shots, and a lot of this is predicated on making loud plays on both ends of the floor, which he did, which Jaylen Brown also did. And I thought Jaylen Brown was great last night, and I think he's probably the value play here. I don't know if he's going to go Eastern Conference Finals MVP and then, Finals MVP, but I do think that at plus 280, it was plus 300 last night on the market. I think Jaylen Brown is a nice value play here. It's most likely, it would more than likely be Tatum than anyone else, but given the start that Jaylen Brown's had and how sustainable I think that could be, he's probably where I look if I wanted some value. You're getting almost 3-1 odds there.
Jaylen Brown, Boston's leading scorer last night, finishing with 22, albeit still under his points prop of 23.5. Brian Fonseca, as always, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here on the early line, and have a great weekend.